Hey there all, Omen here from Transition Partners, here for another episode of Leadership Lessons in Cyber. Yeah. Hi Eric, how you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for coming onto this podcast. I know we've had this in the pipeline for a fair bit of time, and I thought someone like yourself could add a lot of value to the Microsoft ecosystem, essentially, given your role as COO. But I'll stop there. I know I'd love to just get an intro from yourself about who you are, what you do, just so it benefits everyone listening.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Eric Beins, and I've been in IT now in some form or capacity for probably 22 years. It was the summer of 2000 when I started working on some software, and then I got hired on at eBay in 2001 in their trust and safety department. So basically looking for bad guys on an e-commerce site. Um, and there is really where I got introduced to like system design and things like that. I was actually working their fraud cases, and I thought I was going to get in trouble because me and a buddy decided that we didn't like the system, and so we automated our own process. And it ended up that we were about 13 times more productive than the next closest fraud agents. And so the director at the time, over what was called fraud abuse, kind of pulled us onto a conference call. He was out in San Jose, we were here in Salt Lake City, and he's like, "What are you guys doing? How are you guys doing this?" And so we basically told him, "Hey, like we think that the current tool, it's not easy to use. It's missing all these things. So we decided to build our own process." In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, "Don't fire me." And instead, he said, "Well, you guys are no longer working cases. You guys are going to be designing systems." And so that's how I tripped into IT. I actually have an economics degree from the University of Utah. I've used that sometimes when doing like calculations and doing some analysis, but that's how I fell into IT. So I worked at eBay for almost 10 years. And then I had a friend convince me to go and work at the global nonprofit, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so they've got a pretty large IT organization, about 1,200 people. And so I went and managed their workflow design. And so they basically had UX designers. And so I went over there to basically build a practice of people that knew how to do process analysis and like software system design. So that's what I went over there and started a team. And then they asked me to take over all of their global contact center technology. And it was at that time that they were in the market for a CRM. And it was basically a bake-off between Salesforce, Sugar CRM, and Microsoft Dynamics. And they selected Dynamics, and I was part of that evaluation criteria. And it was at that time that I got introduced to really the Microsoft ecosystem. And so that was back in 2010, and I've been on Microsoft and the Dynamics platform ever since then. So that was version 3.0 going into version 4.0 before they even changed names to it. So did that for about 6 years, and then for almost the last 7 years, so it'll be 7 years in February, I've been at JourneyTeam doing consulting. So trying to spread the love and knowledge that I have of Microsoft to everybody.
Yeah, and I remember, we've talked about it. You've gone from pretty much technical leader, if you want to say, now to COO. And this is a question that we didn't prepare for, but you've gone throughout this evolution from literally from technical lead to COO, like I say. But that's been a bit of a journey for you, and you've seen different areas of the business. What's the difference between your role now than it was 6 years ago?
Oh yeah, so 6 years ago, came over as a principal consultant. I mean, you're in the weeds. You're doing the analysis with the client. You're trying to figure out how you can make their process more efficient. You're in the tooling itself, trying to figure out like why isn't this working? I built this workflow to work this way. Like, why are the variables not populating like they should be? I read Microsoft's documentation. Oh, that was crap. It didn't it didn't explain how to actually do it this way. I think the difference now is, making that shift to be more strategic. So what's Microsoft's product positioning? Are we prepared as an organization to, be ready for how they're starting to homogenize their product suite offering, where you've got their collaboration tools and you've got their CRM suite? Like, what's our strategy internally to make sure that we both keep up and kind of stay ahead of the mainstream in terms of like Microsoft's products? So I spend a lot of time there. Obviously, it's a lot of people. So a lot of leadership, building people, identifying where we've got skill gaps in the organization, and how do we mentor, how do we bring in the right people, how do we keep them, how do we put a progression path together for them. So a little less details. I'm not in the system nearly as much. Still involved in our internal, so JourneyTeam's internal systems design and architecture. So try and keep my hands dirty a little bit, but I'd say predominantly most of my role now is kind of on the people and strategy side instead of in the weeds with the
Rolling
details.
up your sleeves, yeah. And you've obviously had to have some inspiration going to that point. So again, completely different roles. You would have had to learn so much in that space, but what's been the best piece of advice that you've had to get to the point that you are now?
Yeah, I think we talk about this a lot. I think the first thing you have to have is a mindset of growth, right? The phrase growth mindset. And so you can't be afraid to learn. You can't be afraid to not know something and just dive into it and figure it out. And so I think that's probably the main thing is that sometimes people are timid or they're not sure about, like, oh, I don't know if I know how to do this. Like, doesn't matter. You got to figure it out, right? And especially in consulting, and where we were, 6.5, 7 years ago, we didn't have other people that we could just say, well, can you do this? It was either you had to figure out, or the client was going to say, well, we'll go find another partner. But I would definitely say, like, have that growth mindset and just do the work, like do the hard work, and it'd pay off. So that's probably the advice I'd give somebody. And I know that was one of the questions, like, what other advice would I give somebody kind of starting out in their career right now. And this was advice given to me back in the day by Kevin Embry, great mentor that I had at eBay. And he pulled me in one time and he was like, what do you think your job is? And so I'm like, oh man, my job's to find, fraud on the site, get rid of it. It's to figure out how we can protect, our sellers and the revenue and our buyers, like, all this stuff. And he's like, those are responsibilities you have, but what do you think your job is? And I'm like, man, I swear I just told you what my job was. And I'm like, well, maybe to figure out how we can do things better. And he's like, yeah, that's part of your job. And he could tell I was, not catching on. And he caught me with a curveball, but he basically said, your job's to make your boss look good. And I was like, that's a weird job. But in the context that he was saying it was do amazing work, right? And do it in a way that when your boss has to report on the activities that you're doing, it makes him look good, or that, them good, her good. And so I've kind of taken that and been like, what, that's probably one of the most like sound pieces of advice when you put it into that context. And we also had another saying there too, right? Which was, you're only as good as your last project. And so I've carried that here into JourneyTeam. I've carried it with me kind of everywhere that I've gone, is that you can't rest on your laurels, and you're only as good as your last project. So kind of that advice to people starting out is like, you you got to bring your A game, and you got to want to work and work hard. You get rewarded for it. It's also what pushes you and challenges you, and that's what people find fulfilling in their career, right? I think you look back to the most challenging times that you've had, and when you get through those, that's also the most rewarding time in your careers. And so I would just say don't be afraid of the work. Make your
Yeah,
boss look good.
I like that. That's like upward manage. I'd look at that as upward management, which is key. Obviously, like people always talk about manage your team, but how do you manage upward? And you've obviously had that philosophy since. And I want to go away to the Microsoft piece because you guys are a Microsoft Gold partner. And
Yeah.
firstly, to link on to the next question I have is your role as COO now. COO can be very broad. It can mean one thing in one company, one thing in another. Tell me specifically, what's your role within the business?
Yeah. So we, if you were to break it into, there's front office and back office at most companies. So I'm anything that's kind of front office client facing. So all of our consultants, our project management office, and we're going to be moving our support office into my organization. So we call it professional services. And so I'm in charge of basically anything focused on delivery to the client.
And you've obviously worked directly with Microsoft a lot. So tell me a bit about that working relationship, how you brought it along, and what it stands to now.
Yeah. So when I started at JourneyTeam, I think we were in the process of moving from a silver to a gold partner. And personally, that meant that I had to go take a bunch of certifications and exams. So in that, we've kind of taken that same mentality that I brought, which was, we're really only as good as the last project that we did and the last deal that Microsoft brought us. We were recovering from a pretty big botched like field service deal when I started. And so it took a couple years specifically for that product suite for us to get back into kind of Microsoft's good graces, right? And how do you do that? You do it by we send them win wires. We tell them like, hey, we just helped you guys close this, or we've just finished this project and we've got this many seats for you. So that's one thing, is making sure that you really take care of Microsoft's leads that they give you, and deliver successfully on those. The next thing with the relationship is making sure that we're meeting the bar, so to speak. So we have a partner development manager, and our goal is always to make sure that they're looking at how can we give JourneyTeam the most benefits possible, and you do that by turning around and looking at all the things that Microsoft wants. They want revenue seats from licenses, right? They want partners that go through and do their advanced specializations, or gold competency. They're changing that. So they want partners that have solutions. They want partners that have an industry specialization, right? And so all of those things we've continued to work on and develop, and it really does help, in terms of forging that relationship with Microsoft. And a lot of times I know that if you get in with a product team, they'll solicit feedback. We like to make sure that whether they ask for it or not, we keep sending it. And so maybe they get tired of hearing from us, but we found that we've built a pretty good relationship now with that field service team, where they'll send us ideas and they'll say, hey guys, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? Will that work for the clients that you guys have done field service with, or with the Power Platform team of, hey, we want to kind of change it so that it'll render this way. You guys have complained, about performance of the portal or the mobile. So I feel like when you hit on those key areas of just do what Microsoft lays out, like their goals. Hey, if their goal is that they want to grow licensing revenue by 20% with partners, well, then let's grow it by 30. Let's grow it by 40. So we try and just hit those out of the park.
Yeah. And
oh yeah, and I was just going to say, and as a result of that, right, like play the game. We always submit for partners of the year. We've won 2 partners of the year. Submit for the inner circle. We were inner circle last year. Do all those things that continue to bring attention, and then just come back to make sure that you're hitting those fundamentals of, we're taking care of their leads, we're doing good on those projects, like, we're checking the boxes.
Awesome. And this will probably be released in 2023. And looking at the partner network, or even just end customer network who you work with, what do you see as the biggest challenges for 2023 for organizations essentially who would partner with you?
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about this in kind of our strategic approach for this next year. We think the main shift is going to go from companies looking at growth to now companies looking at efficiencies. And so as we approach that, it's helping them understand how can the Microsoft ecosystem help them achieve efficiencies. And then we also are kind of doubling down on an investment in being really good at adoption and change management. So not only getting products in, but getting products highly utilized so that companies can realize that value and that benefit is kind of how we're approaching it this next year. And in that goes a lot of details around, okay, well, let's do a review of all your licensing. Are there things that we can do there to maximize your dollar spend? Can we change your licensing around? Can we find better ways to get people to use the tools that you do have? So we put a lot of focus in that, but that's kind of our biggest shift going into 2023 is I think a lot of people are concerned about, the economy and, how do they position themselves? And so we've made a pivot to really focus on where can they become efficient? How can they make sure that they're really stretching and maximizing, their funds as much as possible?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that would be very helpful for people. And on a lighter note, the other question that we prepared, and very deliberate question, was we get a lot of people who are watching who are very young. They're starting off their career. You've given the advice for a 25-year-old, but what about books, audio? What would you recommend for people starting off in consulting or even as a technical lead? I don't know. What have you read?
Oh man, probably too many books, but I would say from probably like a character standpoint of like how can you make sure that you're approaching your career the right way. The Ideal Team Player is a great book. Outward Mindset by like the Arbinger Institute. It's kind of extreme, but it's called Extreme Ownership. It's by some U.S. Navy SEALs, but it's a great book. I'm forgetting a bunch of them, but I really personally love, and it's more kind of, I guess, on the like fluff and philosophical side. But there's an author called Robin Sharma, and
the 5 a.m. Club.
Yeah, 5 a.m. Club. He's got the Everyday Hero Manifesto, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. But I really enjoy how he has an attitude and a perspective of how can you be grateful? How can you pay it forward? How can you really invest in yourself so that you can help and invest in others and serve them? Really love his books. And then I think for those that are maybe in kind of a more technical role and it's kind of story based, and it helps with those looking at like agile, is the Phoenix Project. Great book that kind of breaks down like how can you be more efficient as an organization trying to adopt agile methodologies, and it's kind of just a fun story how they broke it out. So those are the ones off the top of my head that I would recommend to some younger listeners.
Yeah, I've read a lot myself, and podcasts are pretty good as well. So I like doing that in a workout. But the last part is for this, people might want to reach out to you, and if they do, where's the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Eric Beins, Beins.
Yeah.
Not phonetically as you would think. Or they can find me on Twitter, just Beins. And then if they still want to get a hold of me from then, you can always shoot me an email at eric.beins@gmail.com. So pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Aman. It was
Thank
fun to do it.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons in Cyber. I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode.